We're negotiating with Russia, Ukraine, trying to get that horrible situation over with. I've had very good talks with Putin, and I've had not such good talks with Ukraine. They don't have any cards, but they play it tough. But we're not going to let this continue. This war is terrible.
Well, that was U.S. President Donald Trump on his talks with Russia, seeking to negotiate an end to that country's illegal war in Ukraine. Now, it comes at the end of a week that saw the U.S. turn on Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky and host peace talks with only Russia. Joining us now to break down the significance of this week's developments, our former Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations, Louise Blais. She is now an associate at Pendleton Group and Special Senior Advisor to the Business Council of Canada at QG100 in Quebec, and former Chief of the Defense Staff, retired General Tom Lawson. He's now the president at Thomas J. Lawson and Associates. Thank you both for being here. General Lawson, I want to start with you. And we saw there U.S. President Donald Trump today saying that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is negotiating with no cards, adding that he's sick of watching how Zelensky has handled the war. How difficult does this make any type of negotiation going forward?
Well, I think it makes it a lot more difficult than it would have been if this was a negotiation with all cards on the table and both warring parties at the table as well. I think the big thing is what effect this could have on the war going forward. And there's no doubt about it, this would be rough for the morale of Ukrainian soldiers and their officers who have relied on U.S. not only for support, probably more on Americans than the rest of the NATO members. And now not only has that support turned in terms of diplomacy, but also puts in question supplies from the United States going forward. And on the other turn of the coin, this will have a remarkable effect on the morale of Russian soldiers and their officers going forward.
Ms. Blais, former French Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian has said it's our security he's putting at risk now. What can European allies do to push back on this and maintain some sort of sense of unity throughout that continent?
Well, they're already doing it. They obviously, Emmanuel Macron hosted a meeting. They're trying to come together as much as possible to be united. They've reached out to Canada, which is also welcome. But the fact of the matter is, in the short term, the United States really has all the cards. It's really disconcerting to see that President Trump is approaching this a little bit like in 1945, where he's ready to carve out Europe with Vladimir Putin. Last time, the allies were at the table. This time, it's him alone. He's trying to delegitimize Zelensky as a participant in those conversations. It's as if he's not there. He said, I think it was today, Zelensky is not important as this. He doesn't have any cards. So it really does feel as if the United States wants to go at it alone. But Europe does have to come together. It will take time. You're hearing sort of the UK is considering sending troops. Emmanuel Macron said no, at least not now. They're really still figuring out, but they realize it is their own security that is now at risk.
Yeah, and General Lawson, I think what everybody has said from the beginning of this, and this has always been the concern, is that Russia will not stop at Ukraine. How worried are you right now that we're at more of a tipping point than we have been before?
Well, a couple of points there. The first is Ukraine has been underestimated before. As we've heard, the Russian soldiers who marched in there almost 3 years to the day ago took their parade uniforms with them as well for the victory parade that was supposed to happen a few days after the original invasion. Those parade uniforms have been packed away long ago. So I think when President Trump says Ukraine has no cards left to play, they're being underestimated, especially in view of the fact that, as the ambassador was just saying, the rest of NATO is looking at what more they can do to bolster Ukraine going forward. But to your point, Mike, the concern is there. If Russia turns this, with the Trump administration's help, from a near loss into a win, the Baltic states, all of the Eastern European states of NATO, are in great concern, great fear. And throughout the world, that has started to recognize that the world's policeman is no longer there, there's going to be an enormous reaction to rearm and arm in a way that we haven't seen for years. Might is right. And so people are going to have to get a lot stronger within their countries.
Ms. Blais, getting back to Ukraine, is there any hope for that country to restore its borders to where they were before 2014 at this point?
Well, hope is fading, unfortunately. I mean, but just coming back to the fact that not all the blame at this point can be put at the feet of Donald Trump. I mean, there was a sense that we could have helped Ukraine more than be a buffer zone, which I think is what Europe did and is what we did. We could have armed Ukraine. We could have done the no-fly zone. I know we were told this would have been a provocation to the Russian Federation, but really we reap now the fatigue of the war, the fact that there is really a limit to what Ukraine can do in terms of men and women that they can send to the front, whereas the Russian Federation just keeps sending, and then when they're running out, they bring in North Koreans. So I think hope is fading. We have to see whether there's pushback. We have to look at how the Americans are reacting to this fundamental shift. And not just Ukraine, but in America's position in the world as a predator. And this is not happening in isolation. It's the president is talking about, annexing countries and territories and renaming. He's acting a little bit as Vladimir Putin is himself. So are Americans really ready to get in that boat? And is the Congress going to follow the president into this line? We're hearing now that the president is thinking of attending the Victory Day parade in Moscow with Vladimir Putin in May. Can we imagine this? Are Americans going to be okay? I think we need to look at that. We need to see how the Americans will react. And then Donald Trump will adjust. He has already adjusted. He said Ukraine started this. Now he corrected himself. I think there is a limit to how far he can go. But we really have to count on Americans to really push back.
Yeah, and see exactly where it goes from here. Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there. Former Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations, Louise Blais, and former Chief of the Defense Staff, retired General Tom Lawson. Thank you both for being with us today. We really appreciate this.